This place is a kind of inner sanctum that isn't generally open to the public, and in here is one of the most remarkable things in the whole abbey, because behind these recesses are the bones of an English saint. Now, we all know that the patron saint of England is St. George, but it wasn't back in the 13th century. It was this man, St. Edward, who also happened to be the King of England, Edward the Confessor. He was the man who made Westminster a royal church, but not only that, he made it the political heart of the nation. Modern Britain owes a lot to Edward the Confessor. Back in 1042, he created Westminster. He built a palace for the monarchy where the Houses of Parliament now are, and turned an existing church into the Royal Abbey on the site of the present building. The king had put the power of the church and the monarch all in one place, and after his death, the abbey's monks campaigned for the king to become a saint. It may seem astonishing, but 1,000 years later, Edward the Confessor's shrine is still prayed at by Catholic and Anglican archbishops. Not only that, but just as in medieval times, hundreds of pilgrims pay homage to the king. Well, what, 1,000 years after Edward the Confessor died, but even today you can see clear evidence that people still venerate his shrine. How did all that start?
Well, in general, saints were really important in the Middle Ages. They were kind of the medieval celebrities, if you like. They were conduits for miraculous divine power, essentially. So people would visit them to obtain cures, for example, to obtain sustenance in particular endeavours.
But what were Edward's qualifications for being a saint?
Edward started off essentially as a particularly good ruler. He was just, he was kind, he was also increasingly virginal.
How can you get increasingly virginal?
Good question. His virginity is essentially related to his corpse. It's a vehicle of purity which renders his corpse incorrupt.
You mean by incorrupt that it didn't rot?
Absolutely.
So early on, people thought that his body would still be lying there in the tomb, like someone who was alive, basically.
Looking hale and hearty, yeah. And this was a standard marker of sanctity in the early 12th century.
What kind of things was it thought that Edward could cure?
He had a fairly interesting portfolio. In the early miracles, he cured cripples, he cured a particularly unfortunate lumpy lady. But as the occult progressed, he developed a specialism in blindness.
What intrigues me is that even though you and I are probably quite sceptical about turning a king into a saint and whether he was a virgin or not, there are still people who take him seriously enough to venerate his shrine.
He's a very persistent saint.
Unlike today, in the 12th century the abbey was lived in by Catholic monks. Having St. Edward within their church was really useful, not just in drawing in pilgrims, but it meant the monks could make the most of the royal connection.